Hello, everybody. It is Sunday, the 8th of January, 2023, and welcome to the Wrestling Republic Daily Broadcast. Today, I'm joined by, he's on a 15-day streak, Clark Taylor. How are you, Clark?
I'm good, man. It's 15 in a row. It's solid. It's been fun. I think I've been on every show so far, and getting the day off tomorrow, but we'll be right back at it on Tuesday. And I'm excited for today's show. We got a sweet list of topics and a nice crew with us today.
We absolutely do. And we're also joined by Head of Opinions, Anthony Ricciardi, and Head of Reviewing, Coby Galenzoski. How are you guys?
Doing all right.
Doing fine.
Nice. Right. We're going to open the show up, right, with an update on the possible sale of WWE. Now, if you guys haven't heard the news and been living under a rock the last few days, Vince McMahon has rejoined WWE to basically sell the company. He's not going to be involved in creative. Well, so they say, and at least we hope. But yes, WWE have now reportedly hired JP Morgan to advise them on the sale. And the biggest update in the last couple of days is CNBC have revealed the 9 companies who could buy WWE. And like we said the other day, there's no consortiums because it's very unlikely that they're going to buy, a brand as big as WWE. So people theorizing that Triple H and Stephanie McMahon could, or even Tony Khan could form a consortium to buy the company. It's not going to happen. But the 9 companies they're saying that could purchase WWE are Legacy Media. Sorry, let me get the list up here. Sorry about that, guys. The 9 companies who could buy WWE: Legacy Media, who are a streaming giant. Sorry, I've completely messed up my list. Just give me 1 second, guys.
No worries.
There we are. Okay, we're all good now. Here it is. The first one being one of the ones we talked about the other day, Comcast. They, of course, own NBC, and that's why a lot of people are saying that NBC Universal can't buy WWE because, of course, they're owned by Comcast. But in reality, Comcast could actually buy it through NBC or separately. So we're going to have to see how that one goes. But NBC isn't on this list, but still, in my eyes, is certainly a potential buyer. Then we have Fox. Of course, they're also owned by Disney, so Disney's also on the list. Then we have, quite interestingly, Warner Brothers. Warner Bros. Discovery, which, of course, currently is the TV destination for all elite wrestling, but that TV deal expires next year. So you're in a situation now where maybe they decide to buy WWE, and after their deal with AEW finishes, let AEW go. And that would, certainly be something. I personally don't see it happening, but that is an option. Another one on the list by CNBC is Netflix, which, again, I'm not sure if I could see it happening, but would certainly be a ballsy move from Netflix to do. And another company, which is the one which Clark mentioned the other day, could be a potential option, is Amazon. And then, of course, we get to the obvious Endeavor. They're the ones who, of course, bought UFC just a couple of years ago now. They're honestly possibly the favorites heading into it at this moment in time. Then the final one, which CNBC mentioned, and this is a bit of a surprising one, basically, is Liberty Media. And they own Formula One, but yeah, this article was the first time which we really heard of, any possible interest from them. And of course, this article released by CNBC, it's been treated by a lot of people as almost fact. Almost like a report that they're saying that these companies really they have interest in buying them, when it is more or less them. It's more a speculative piece, but it is a speculative piece by experts. But now I'm going to give my info on what I've heard, right? I've spoken to a couple of sources about all this. One source seemed to think that Comcast or Endeavor are the most likely by far, while the other claimed that it's more likely that Comcast would go through NBC to purchase WWE. And then there's also still a chance for Disney to come up. I didn't hear anything about Liberty Media, Fox, Netflix, or Amazon, or Warner Brothers when I spoke to my sources on this matter. But who knows? And of course, Disney technically owns Fox, as I said before. So it's a similar thing where, just like Comcast could buy it separately from NBC, or they could go through NBC to buy it, Disney could do the same thing. But I think from Disney's perspective, it would make a bit more sense to do it separately. Whereas for Comcast, it would probably make more sense to go through NBC. But we've spoken about this now a lot the past few days on the show. And the one thing which I don't want to drag this on for too long, but Clark, who do you think at this moment in time is your pick to buy it? What is your prediction?
I think Endeavor's they're the lead horse in the race right now. I think that would be my pick. If I had to choose. In situations like this, you do never know that if there's like some sort of late player or different kind of things can happen. But if I had to pick one, I would have to say Endeavor would be the lead horse in the race. I thought it was very telling after Money in the Bank that they did make the walk across the street to go watch the UFC. I think that they had to give permission for Izzy Adesanya to use the Undertaker entrance and walk out with the urn and wear the hat and all of that. They were conveniently placed behind the champion's corner, so every round you could see Nick Khan, Triple H, Stephanie all sitting there and watching that fight. That to me was very telling. I don't think that was as simple as here's some free tickets after you guys' show. I think they might have had a dinner, some preliminary talks even then, to get the ball kind of rolling. And that to me is so what makes them the front runner of the bunch. But I mean, that is no guarantee, right? NBC, Universal, Comcast are very much players in the game, and any of the other companies named that maybe we haven't, heard the whispers about may be doing that to gear up and figure out what the landscape looks like. And if it's something that they want to, after they hear more about what other companies are thinking about offering and whatnot, they may step in and think, okay, now we are interested. Watching a competitor go after the WWE may cause a company like an Amazon or one of those other ones that we've named that hasn't necessarily been mentioned by sources to go, well, I don't want to see that, and step up and maybe even just to try to drive the price up. But if I had to pick one, Endeavors is the one I would go with.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people don't realize how rich Endeavor really are. Like, they are one of the richest. I think somebody said, who's actually in the comments watching right now, a friend of mine, Jacob. I think he said the other day that they're the seventh richest company in the world at this moment in time. They are, because they have their own. So they got their, they're involved in a lot of different things. They're involved with FIFA, UEFA. They've got a lot of small stakes and a lot of different things. It's crazy to me. But of course, they own the UFC, and that is in my prediction of who will buy the company at this moment in time. What about you, Anthony? Who's your pick to buy?
I mean, for me, it's a toss-up between Comcast and Endeavor. I think, and I mentioned this yesterday, I think whatever deal that Vince is working with, whatever buyer, I think there's going to be something in there that maintains that the McMahons still run it, almost like Dana with the UFC. There's so much history with NBC and WWE. I mean, Raw's been on USA Network almost every year of its existence, except that one brief period when they, moved networks, but they always went back there. The WWE Network is a central piece to the Peacock streaming service. I wouldn't rule out Comcast, but I think it's between Comcast and Endeavor at this point. Disney, they love owning intellectual property. They love owning film libraries, so you can never really eliminate them from the competition. Amazon's another one. I really don't see Warner Brothers, just because they're canceling things constantly. They filmed entire movies for the DC stuff and went, never mind. I just don't see them putting in that kind of money. And if there's anybody there from the era where they owned WCW, they didn't want it. They didn't want to own a wrestling company. So I don't see them turning around buying another wrestling company and essentially buying WCW back, part of the archive that they would get. But yeah, I think it's between Comcast and Endeavor would be my guess. And I do think McMahon's will still continue to run it. It would be my guess is what Vince wants in that thing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that's a really good point you just brought up then about they technically buying back WCW. But
yes,
that would certainly be that would make 2023 crazier than 2022 perhaps. But Coby, what is your prediction?
So coming into this, I'm probably the one with the least kind of business-ish knowledge. Like I do have some, but like I'm not gonna know a lot of it. I have what's been said with the last few days, and it's like I do believe like I'm gonna agree with Anthony. I do think those are the two. I'd group NBC and Comcast as similar buyers type of thing. So I'd either say it's them or it'll be Endeavor, which I mean they own the UFC. They like the combat aspect of it. I don't think Fox is a leading run because apparently, as far as I know, they're not making the money back on their SmackDown deal because they haven't made the advertising back. I think that's something I heard, which I can't remember where exactly it was. It's been a few weeks, but I don't think they'd be interested in continuing to buy it.
Yeah.
Nor did I mean, yeah, Disney might. I don't think any of the other ones are remotely thing. I don't think the Netflix, Amazon, or I mean, I've never heard of Liberty personally, but like I've never heard. I don't think those are in the running at all.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And what you mentioned then about TV rights as well. Of course, the current favourites for SmackDown is USA again now, right? It's rumored that they're going to offer more than Fox are this time round, and of course now the possible sale is in things. The media rights predictions out the window for the time being until we know who's owning the company. But
Ben, the one thing that I kind of want to point out, and I think it's a little murky. Disney owning Fox, it's kind of a weird thing because the Fox main broadcasting network, I don't know if necessarily Disney bought that because when SmackDown is preempted, it goes on FS1, which Disney does not own.
Oh.
So
wow.
I don't know where that falls. It was a weird, murky situation, I think, when they bought it because I don't think they weren't allowed to keep the sports network. I don't think they were either allowed to buy them or they weren't allowed to keep the sports networks because they own ESPN. So I know the Murdochs kept the news division. I don't know if they kept the sports too. I'm not 100% certain, but I don't necessarily think Disney owns the Fox broadcasting network. I could be wrong.
Well, I know Anthony, for baseball, like the local sports network changed to Bally Sports. They rebranded as Bally, and they did that in a lot of spots around the country. But there still is an FS1 channel. It just doesn't carry nearly the same programming lineup that it did when they had like the rights for the baseball teams, and then they used to have the Lakers as well on like Fox Sports West, and whether Angels, I want to say even the Padres were Fox Sports as well, but now we're on that Bally station.
Yeah, I think I think they had to sell that stuff off. I think either they had to sell it off or the Murdochs kept it. I don't remember which, but I remember there was an obstacle in the whole monopoly argument in that they weren't allowed to get them because they had the ESPN stuff.
Yeah, I've just fact checked now, and Fox Corporation is separate from Fox itself.
Yes,
but that still exists independent from Disney, and that is only the news and some sports. So that's what that is, and that does sound, like you said, a very murky, confusing.
It is like really convoluted.
Yeah, I know that. The Comcast one I knew with the NBC, I knew that they owned that, but it was a very weird situation. I know when Disney bought Fox because Fox technically didn't go away. They technically didn't own the whole thing. It was very weird, but I know they bought 20th Century Fox and a bunch of other pieces. So they got the films and the shows and so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, that's So that does explain, I mean, I guess why Fox is potentially more of a buy than NBC, twice. But I still don't. I still honestly do think though for Comcast it would make more sense to go through. And I'm going to be honest, this isn't an opinion directly from me, even though I agree with it. A lot of people have been saying it that it would make more sense for NBC to do it through for Comcast to do it through NBC because it would raise the value of NBC significantly by doing that. But also just to confirm about the not Comcast Endeavor thing earlier on that I said. It's the 7th highest earning company by income. That's what Endeavor is in the world, which is so they've clearly, they've got the money to buy it. And Rick Taylor here is saying that Endeavor already kept Dana White running UFC. That same structure would be very attractive to Vince and family, and it absolutely would.
That's a great point.
It's Endeavor to me is really the main front runner at this moment in time. But now, enough about the sale for today. Let's get on now to what Ric Flair said this week. He did an interview and he spoke about Shawn Michaels. And he said, he spoke about who the greatest performer of all time is. And he said, I don't think twice. The greatest performer in our business of all time is Shawn Michaels. And that's hard to argue. He can work both ways. He's a phenomenal babyface and all that. But when he was younger, Shawn could be a prick, which made it real, and it came across. I mean, Shawn is the first guy to do a moonsault and all that. If you think about it, those matches he had with Taker, even despite the size difference, literally he carried me in that match at WrestleMania 24. So I think that I had a lot of influence on the young guys like him and Hunter and all that. And certainly there's a place for me in that. But I can't ever tell you that my skill was that of Shawn Michaels. And this has caused, quite a big debate on Twitter. So I wanted to bring this to the podcast today and ask you guys what you think. Clark, I'll go to you first. What do you think? Do you agree with Ric Flair on this statement?
I don't always agree with Ric Flair, but man, is he spot on this one. Shawn Michaels is what made me a wrestling fan. Growing up, my very first VHS tape was Most Unusual Matches, WWE tape, and my favorite match from that tape, he actually lost, and he was a heel, accompanied by Sherry, I believe. Yeah, a Sensational Sherry at the time. And it was a ladder match against Bret Hart. A lot of people forget that ladder match happened, the original ladder match, before the Mania match with Razor, and it's one of the best matches I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's outstanding. It's just great. Both of them are awesome, and Bret wins, and Bret's supposed to be the babyface, but even as a little kid watching that VHS, I just loved Shawn because he was the flashier. And then WrestleMania 12 was my first live show, and the boyhood dream, and by then he was a babyface. I'll never forget it. And so, yeah, I'm biased in that regard. But then also, if you look over his resume as far as all-time classic matches, you can name so many over so many years. And to Flair's point, heel, babyface, it didn't matter. He worked as a heel against Undertaker in the first Hell in a Cell match. How's that even possible? And it landed. Like, he was the clear heel. And then he turns around and he's the ultimate babyface against Triple H upon his return after the injury in the match at SummerSlam, the 2-match series with Taker where they're both like tweeners at Mania. The Kurt Angle Mania match is one of my all-time favorite WrestleMania matches. The Chris Jericho Mania match. He didn't even have to win at WrestleMania every time to be considered Mr. WrestleMania. Even I would argue John Cena's best WrestleMania main event was the year it was him and Shawn Michaels one-on-one. It was the best bell-to-bell match John Cena had in a wrestling main event, or in a WrestleMania main event in his career, and he had a lot of them, but it was him and Shawn Michaels. And I thought that story going in was one of the weaker ones for Cena or Shawn heading into a main event match, right? It didn't make a ton of sense to me. They kind of tagged together briefly, and that was a weird thrown together thing, after the Triple H and Shawn DX reunion and stuff. That was kind of how it worked. Triple H got hurt again, and then it ended up being it was supposed to be, I believe, actually Triple H and Cena, correct?
Yeah, he got injured.
Yeah, and then he got injured, and it ended up being Shawn. But in that one, even the WrestleMania 20 main event, with the three-way, you don't talk about the guy who won it, but Shawn was outstanding in that match.
The winner of the Rumble pretend like didn't happen. Yeah, I was there for that one. Yeah,
you were. Yeah, I could go on and on.
Rumble.
There's so many that he almost never missed, and even like the legend, the oversells against Hogan at SummerSlam. It's one of my favorite. It's just only Shawn could pull that off. And like the storytelling on the mic, you could have him do anything. He could be funny, he could be serious. All the DX I think revival stuff in the PG era, that's a tough thing to navigate, and that was a testament to his talent, that he was still able to give you enough of that humor and what came with the original DX and the Attitude Era, which I loved as well. But I thought that's a testament to how good he is as a performer on the microphone, improv wise, all of those things. I can't say enough good things about him. I think he's the best to ever do it, for sure.
Damn, big statement there. So you agree with Ric Flair on that? What do you think,
I do.
Anthony? Do you agree with Ric Flair's statement that Shawn Michaels is the best performer of all time?
I've always felt that way. The two wrestlers that got me interested in wrestling was Undertaker and Shawn. The Undertaker angle with Kane is what got me in, and that was around the same time as the WrestleMania buildup of Shawn and Austin, which would be Shawn's farewell for a few years. But Shawn Michaels to me is without a doubt the greatest that's ever performed. He's been able to get over as a face, a heel. No matter who he was in the ring with, they were better for having the match with Shawn. If you couldn't have a good match with Shawn, you really couldn't have a good match with anybody. There was one line that I remember Rick saying, and it's disrespectful to Scott Hall, because Scott Hall was a hell of a performer too. But I remember Rick saying when he was asked about the WrestleMania 10 ladder match, he goes, "Oh, you mean the match where Shawn wrestled a ladder and Scott Hall happened to be there?" Yeah, I mean, that's, that was disrespectful to Scott, but I mean, that was a hell of a match, the ladder match. Shawn's feud with Hunter is probably one of the greatest feuds in the history of the business. Shawn's match with Rick really should have been Rick's last match, legitimately, because he was able to pull out a phenomenal match with him. The matches with The Undertaker, the two WrestleMania matches are probably the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, especially WrestleMania 25. I had the honor of meeting Shawn. Very nice. Again, that was well after his Bret Hart period. But I mean, Shawn is the best. There's a reason why Dolph Ziggler or AJ Styles or Will Ospreay, or people call them, the next Shawn Michaels. There's nobody else that somebody goes, it's this guy. It's Shawn. Nobody's saying, this person's the next Flair. It's Shawn. So, I mean, it's telling, even the gap period where Shawn hadn't had a match in like 4 years on a big stage. I know he had a couple independent ones on his own promotion after his back injury. It's like he never missed any time. Shawn is the best of all time.
Big statement there again. So yet another person who agrees. What do you think, Coby? Do you agree with Rick's Flair statement?
So I'm coming from a place that's much different with my youth, and really only being a wrestling fan for 11 years. I can't exactly, that's the thing. I guess my first exposure to Shawn Michaels outside of him in a wrestling game would have been him as the referee for the end of an era, Hell in a Cell. Like, I'm coming into this as someone who really hasn't seen the match library, hasn't seen his career in a perspective. But from a standpoint of, I know his ability, I know a lot of the stuff, and it is, as much as it's secondhand knowledge, it is knowledge. And I can't disagree, but I can agree because I don't officially have a standpoint because of my experiences being secondhand, or like I haven't seen his career fully, or I haven't seen a lot of it. Like, I can probably count the amount of Shawn Michaels in-ring matches I've seen on a hand or a couple hands. I know him from the DX Crown Jewel match.
No.
Woof.
We did watch Mind Games Mankind, by the way. I think.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
We've watched a few together. Have I seen a lot of it? No, I haven't. But I do agree that he was one of the best in the ring. I think this is more of a conversation of, we've seen the people say Bret Hart is. And for me, the greatest wrestler comes down to a lot of things. You got to have the versatility from a character standpoint. You got to be a good heel, a good face. You got to be a good wrestler in the ring. You got to be able to wrestle multiple styles, whether that's technical, more athletic, more, I guess, showmanship type of thing. Like, to me, this comes with the whole Bret Hart situation. I don't. Yes, I'm going to say it again. Secondhand knowledge. I've seen the only Bret Hart match I've watched is the 60-minute Iron Man. Shawn.
With Shawn, yeah.
And that was because of Clark.
Yep.
At the end of the day,
I made him watch all 60.
Yeah, we
60
watched
plus.
all
By the way,
60.
that one goes to OT.
Yes, we watched it. Yeah, we watched it, and it was just like, to my knowledge, I don't think Bret Hart's that versatile in the ring.
By comparison to Shawn,
Shawn, I think Shawn wrestles many more styles.
Yeah,
I know
can wrestle more styles.
I know Shawn had said. I'm pretty sure Shawn said in an interview. He goes, "I think Owen was better than Bret because Owen was more versatile than Bret was."
I think that makes a lot of sense, too. I totally see that, and there's a lot of Owen you see in today's stuff. And the other thing I was going to add to even Coby's point, and I think this is a place where, right, with your more modern perspective on wrestling, because of when, age and when you started watching, you just can see so much of Shawn Michaels in today's wrestling. Every super kick, every nip up, every moonsault, every springboard, heck, I would, a lot of people drop the elbow for Macho Man. I'd say almost just as many drop it for Shawn.
Well, and the smaller
even
competitor,
even the flying forearm that he threw.
Yes.
You can see so much of Shawn's fingerprints on the movesets of today's stars. It's that to me is one of the mark of, right? Like, obviously Cesaro uses the sharpshooter. There's things like that. And this is no knock on Bret Hart. I think Bret Hart's a great technician, but I think to Coby's point, right, he was limited in relation to Shawn as far as what he could do stylistically. Shawn could wrestle a brawler, he could wrestle a high flyer, he could wrestle a real big man.
Giant,
you know what I mean? Yeah,
yes.
He could wrestle a broomstick, for lack of a better
Well, that's
cliche,
always been
right?
Yes.
And I think that is what separates those two. I also think Shawn was more charismatic, and Mick Foley obviously is great, but I mean, I think Mick Foley said it before that Mind Games match that I showed Coby.
That was
Shawn. That's his favorite match of his whole career. It's with Shawn.
It was his favorite match before I think he had his match with Edge. I think, or
yes,
one of those two were
he
placed.
Loved the Edge one.
The Mind Games one is always high on his list.
Yeah, which is funny because it's a non-finish.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's a 25-minute gem with a non-finish.
Yep.
The one thing I want to add to this discussion is that the greatest of all time is something which it's very hard to discuss because every generation, and it was what you guys just said then about people taking stuff from Shawn. Every generation is taking something from the last, and Rick briefly addressed it in that, right? In what he said about Shawn being inspired by him. But for his generation, it's just hard to combine all the generations and be like, this is, the best person ever, because every generation inspired the next generation.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess you can say that every newer generation is then a better generation, but is that really the case? Because now a lot of stuff's overdone. And you get into this, you spiral in more and more. But I will say this, right? Again, I'm of course a lot younger, but Shawn Michaels, when I first got into wrestling, was one of the people who got me into wrestling. And it was not too long before he ended up retiring in the match against The Undertaker. In fact, no, it was not too long before he did the first match, but the first of the two WrestleMania matches against Undertaker, WrestleMania 25. It was not long before then that he got me into wrestling. Him, Rey Mysterio, and Undertaker. Rey Mysterio, Undertaker, and Batista feud was the first feud that I watched, but Shawn Michaels was somebody who really stood out to me, and for some reason I always gravitated towards him. And what Clark went back to earlier about, rooting for him. There's just something about him where
He's
even,
the ultimate underdog.
He really is. And just everything he does, it just looks so elegant and he's just been fascinating to watch. So I think the argument of his generation, was he the best of his generation? I think there's a very big argument for yes, and in fact, I'll probably go that far based on what I've seen, and I've seen a lot of Bret Hart matches. I've seen I've seen a lot of even untelevised Bret Hart matches. A couple of years ago, I just went on a streak of just watching old Bret matches for a few weeks, and I was watching like a few a day, and I ended up watching must have been nearly hundreds of them, and I'm a big Bret fan, but I honestly do think that Shawn does probably take the title for me. But Soul is saying in the comments, he's giving his opinion. and he is saying, for being the GOAT, I feel there are two versions, as a wrestler and as a ticket seller. For me, the best wrestler is Chris Jericho, and the best ticket and merch seller would be John Cena. Now, I think Chris Jericho is great. I think the way that he's innovated himself has been absolutely fascinating, and he's innovated himself. I think there's an argument that he's innovated himself perhaps better than anybody has before, perhaps. But I really personally
and Jericho was greatly inspired by Shawn, but I think
I was going to say I don't think Jericho would put himself over Shawn.
I think it's telling the fact that Ben, the age difference between us and Shawn Michaels was what got us into wrestling. I think that speaks volumes that generationally that Shawn connected with both our generations as the guy.
Going back to what you said earlier too, Ben, about him just kind of having that you drawn to him, that it factor. I've said this before. He walks cool. Yeah. I can't even explain it, but he walks cool. I remember before he did the NWO Hall of Fame thing, or not even the NWO, it might have been DX. I forget which one it was, but on one of those Hall of Fame shows or whatever, they show him talking backstage. It's one of those behind the scenes network type shows. Mm-hmm. And he just does this little strut before he goes through the curtain while all the other guys are old and limping. And he's just bouncing out in this cool way. I don't know even how to explain it. It's just maybe the best body awareness I think in the history of wrestling too. The way he could sell moves and make moves, take moves and things like that. I think that's part of it. But he does just walks cool.
Well, I think it was the same one, Clark. I think it was before. I want to say it was Scott Hall's induction. They were backstage at the Hall of Fame.
That's exactly what it was.
I remember Scott saying something that I always thought was great. He goes, "It doesn't matter how hurt you are. The moment that music hits, you get it." And he did the Scott Hall thing, and he goes, "You just go," and that was Shawn.
Yeah, 100%.
Same way,
100%. It's one of my he just had it, for lack of a better term, more than almost anyone. Yeah, just the total it factor. And I also wonder if he doesn't miss those 4 years with the back injury, as far as maybe he wasn't the most giant merch seller, but remember he was at the peak of his merch sales portion of his career when he had to walk away in the middle of DX. When he would say that he was probably selling the most merch, and he misses those 4 years in the middle of that era where those shirts and things were flying off the shelves, and he doesn't really necessarily get tied to that. I'm wondering if you add that to the equation, then I think there's even an argument in that department to be made.
You can even look at the fact Shawn had arguably a Hall of Fame career when he went out with his back injury.
Right.
He could have been a first ballot Hall of Famer right then and there.
He's already a Hall of Famer. He could have retired then.
He comes back and has a whole. If you just look at both versions of his career, both the first run and the second run are Hall of Fame worthy. And the fact that that's all together, I think it's clear that he's the GOAT.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, the more we talk about him as well, of course, another thing, I mean, you briefly mentioned this, but his theme song, the entrance, that's, and the way he just did it, it was it. And you also briefly touched on this, Clark, his selling, even his selling made you root for him, as weird as that is to say. It just did.
It did. The turnbuckle spot when he does the flip, there's nothing cooler. He made getting thrown into the turnbuckle cool.
Yep.
Every time he did it too, with the hair flying up after he does the flip and then he kind of falls back. Oh, it was incredible. All the stuff was, and one of the most underrated things about him too, you don't think about this, he threw one of the best right hands in wrestling. One of the best right hands in wrestling. And I also believe Shawn's left-handed, which is kind of ironic.
Well, even the nip-ups, knowing his back injury. He was still doing
nip up after the back surgery.
Yes.
Oh, it is. I think we can all agree that this is, in recent times, one of the less crazy things that Ric Flair has said. Then, I think when it comes down to it, we all more or less we either agree or we can undoubtedly see the argument for it to be the case. But now I'm going to move on to our final segment of today's show, and that is that Fightful Select in the last week or two have reported that Tama Tonga and Hikuleo are both WWE interested in signing both of them. Of course, both of them work for New Japan currently. Tama Tonga is the never openweight champion, and Hikuleo has currently got he's set to have a loser leaves Japan match against Jay White. Which, I mean, if rumors are true, then it's obvious who's going to win that one. But yeah, so they're both rumored to be coming, not necessarily coming to WWE, but they're rumored for WWE to have the interest in them to come to the company. And Tama Tonga 7 years ago rejected an offer from WWE to stay in New Japan. So whether or not he's going to change his mind this time or he's going to continue in Japan, we'll have to wait and see. But the thing is, if they do come to WWE, what would they do? One argument is that they could, join the OC, and WWE could finally have their own proper Bullet Club. Of course, Tama Tonga was one of the founders of Bullet Club. Well, ever so slightly after, but both him and Farley were some of the originals in it. But Tama Tonga and Hikuleo, they could come in and they'd be great additions to the OC, certainly. But the other argument is perhaps they could join the Bloodline, or when The Rock comes in, presumably at the Rumble, like everybody's speculating, perhaps that splits the Bloodline, and the Usos and Solo Sikoa are upset with Roman for turning on Sami Zayn. So perhaps they side with The Rock, and Roman needs to bring in two guys who are part of the Bloodline, Tama Tonga and Hikuleo. They both technically have his blood. It's true, they do. So maybe that's the way to bring them in. There's two possible ways you could do it, but the question is it worth it for WWE? What do you think, Clark?
I think it's always worth it to send a talent the caliber of Tama Tonga. Like, no matter how they're going to use him, they may misuse him, but there's often talk about rosters being too stacked. At the same time, though, if you've got too much talent, it's not as big of a problem as having not enough. And I don't know which of the storylines I would rather them do, the OC or the Bloodline one. I think either's fine. I don't even know necessarily that. I think you could do one of each. You have Tama Tonga do the OC thing. You have Hikuleo do the Bloodline thing, right? You don't even necessarily have to pair them if you really wanted to, and I'd be fine with both of those things. I have a hard time thinking of a reason where you'd be like, no, I wouldn't sign those guys. Like a 7-footer who's got, he's multi-generational professional, and then Tama Tonga, we know how good he is. Yeah, I can't fathom a reason not to want to sign two talents of that caliber.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Tama Tonga and Hikuleo are they're brothers, but they're adopted brothers. So Tama Tonga was adopted, but he's actually Hikuleo's cousin. So they still are of the same bloodline, and they were brought up as brothers, and they consider themselves brothers, I do believe. But what do you think, Anthony? How would you bring them in if you were to bring them in?
I mean, I think either one of those options, whether it was with the Bullet Club or the Bloodline, I think that either one of them could work. Tama Tonga is somebody that one of the few New Japan talents that I've always really liked, and I think they could really do a lot with it. WWE's always had a strong tie to the Rock's family, the Samoan family. So I totally think they could bring them in. It wouldn't shock me if they brought in Haku as well. I mean, they've always had strong ties with all that. It is an interesting thing if The Rock does come in with his own bloodline, if you will, as part of that feud. I mean, that would be an interesting thought for them to do. The Rock's bringing in his own, the elders or bringing in, they're not happy with Roman or something. There's a lot of things you can do with that. And Tama Tonga long term, I think he's somebody the company could easily get behind.
Yeah, and as well, as you mentioned, Haku, he could be one of the ones who's unhappy with how Roman's been acting or whatever, and he could be one of the ones sending The Rock. And like you said, bringing his own blood, like perhaps Haku gives The Rock his two sons in order to do it. That would be fascinating for sure.
Well, remember, Haku and Rikishi were a tag at one point. Again, that's all tied. They could bring Kishi in. I mean, I would love for a moment where something happens and Kishi was able to drop "I Did It for the Rock" one more time.
Oh, that'd be classic. Just bring that back around. I did it for the Rock.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, that would be
I
would
didn't
be
even think about
fascinating.
that.
I mean,
so
that's
funny.
the whole thing. Like, I would love to see a moment where Kishi gets involved and somehow costs Roman something, and the sons go, "Why did you do it?" And he goes, "I did it for the Rock." Just, I mean, that's one of those things that anybody that was there during that time would get a chuckle out of, because it's the famous line that, why he ran Austin over. With the
so fucking funny. Freaking funny.
Yeah.
It's so good.
But I mean, I really hope that they do get the elders involved in that storyline. Whether or not they bring in Tama Tonga and Hikuleo for that storyline is a different thing. But I really hope that they get the elders involved in some way or the other, because that's way more interesting to me than just doing Reigns versus Roman Reigns, which would great Reigns versus The Rock, which would obviously be a fantastic match. And there's a lot of story you can do just based off those two alone. But with the bloodline going full circle and bringing the elders back into it, that would just be fascinating for me. And I feel like, as long-term storytelling, that's just something that I personally would love to happen. And either way, I'll be happy if we do get Reigns versus The Rock. But involving the elders as well, that is some great stuff. Oh, what would you do, Coby? How would you buck Hikuleo and Tama Tonga in WWE?
I like that Clark stole it, or I don't like it actually, but he stole what I was going to say. I think Hikuleo can fit in the bloodline, but I think you're almost in the point where if he does follow suit because of his contract ending in weeks, Tama Tonga would fit the OC because you have AJ Styles out.
Yeah,
you like that's a gap that, as Gallows and Anderson, they are almost directionless. And you could go a direction with Tama Tonga at the head, if you want to say it that way. I don't know what's next, because we don't know if they're going to continue the Judgment Day, because they haven't. They've been doing either the Judgment Day, they've been doing still the Dominic and Rhea stuff with Ray, and then I think we're still rumored to get Edge returning. But I mean, at the end of the day, even after, if Finn gets the final match, gets the final win on Edge at the Rumble, if it's at the Rumble or if it's at Mania, I think Tama Tonga could be a suitable next in line for Balor, like a next in line feud for Balor.
Yeah, no, that'd certainly be absolutely fascinating to watch. The one issue I would have with that is if you're bringing in Hikuleo to the bloodline, if you bring it there and then bring it in Tama Tonga at the exact same time, it just wouldn't make much sense to me, because, Hikuleo, okay, yes, they're adopted brothers, they're technically cousins, but they are brothers. Like, Hikuleo and Tama Tonga are brothers, so I think to bring them in the exact same time and have them on, in separate factions, I mean, I guess they'd be on separate brands, so maybe that's how you could argue it. But even still, I don't know if I completely understand the booking behind that if they were to do it. But I mean, there's a lot they can do with them, and I think we all agree that they would definitely be beneficial to WWE. And both of their contracts expire with New Japan very, very soon, apparently next few weeks. Well, as far as Tama Tonga goes, it's next few weeks. Hikuleo could be even sooner than that. So it's gonna be fascinating time, and of course they're already teasing this next class of recruits for the PC is going to be one of the biggest ones ever. So yeah, it's certainly an exciting time for WWE right now with the sale, new talents coming in. Let's just hope somebody doesn't come in, buy it, and ruin it, and put Vince back at the helm. But
by the way, do their contracts expire before the Rumble or after? Just out of curiosity.
We don't know.
Okay.
There's no date.
Okay, so it says Tama Tonga's New Japan contract is up in a matter of weeks. So take that for what you will. And I just got to find the Hikuleo one, which says, so Hikuleo is booked in a loser leaves Japan match against Switchboy Jay White. It's important to note that we haven't been told if contact has been made between the two sides of when Hikuleo's contract is up. However, we've been told that much like with Finn Balor helping bring in Dragon Lee, intermediaries have been used to express interest to the talent themselves.
That's very interesting. And I mean,
Yes.
the one thing I do want to say about that, though, too, is that there are still a lot of rumors that Jay's returning to the US for some time to look after his, well, he's soon to have a child, the rumor is. So there's a lot of rumors that he's going to be one of the ones who are relaunching the ROH brand. So, of course, New Japan Strong is officially ending now. Well, that's, I don't know if New Japan have officially said it now, but Hiroshi Tanahashi has. But the rumor is that the strong talent's now going to be on Ring of Honor with the relaunch, and that's the involvement that New Japan have with Ring of Honor. So perhaps they could use Jay White in Ring of Honor. That is the one of the current rumors going around. So it could even be that Jay White actually loses this match, because it's not loser leaves New Japan, it's loser leaves Japan. So that and they emphasized that a lot on Japanese commentary apparently. So that is something perhaps we've all been swerved to, and Hikuleo is actually still under contract and he's going to be staying there. Or perhaps he is going to be WWE bound, and so is Tama Tonga. Who knows? It's an exciting time to be a fan. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been a blast. And we're going to be back here same time tomorrow. So we'll see you all then. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a great rest of your day or night. And see you guys
wherever
tomorrow.
you are.
Wherever you are in the world. See you tomorrow.
Have a good one.